Hollywood gave us heroes, legends, and million-dollar smiles. But behind the cameras, some stars were allegedly anything but charming. From explosive egos to scandals darker than a theater at midnight, these actors turned real life into their most disturbing role. Here are the 20 most evil actors in Hollywood history. Here goes my vote. Number 1, Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy spent decades convincing audiences he was Hollywood's ultimate gentleman. On screen, he played honorable, dependable men. Off-screen, however, his private life reportedly told a very different story. While fans admired his clean-cut image studio, insiders knew Tracy was surrounded by affairs controversy and secrets that rarely reached the headlines. Apparently, the only role he never wanted to rehearse was faithful husband. According to biographers, Tracy was romantically linked to several of Hollywood's biggest stars, including Joan Crawford, Hedy Lamarr, Loretta Young, Lana Turner, and Ingrid Bergman. His most famous relationship was a 26-year affair with Katharine Hepburn, even though he remained legally married to his wife, Louise Tracy. MGM carefully protected his reputation, allowing the public to believe he was still the devoted Catholic family man they admired. His troubles didn't end there. Actress Irene Dunne reportedly complained to MGM boss Louis B. Mayer after Tracy repeatedly made unwanted advances toward her, prompting Mayer to personally warn him to stop. The irony couldn't be greater. Spencer Tracy built a legendary career playing men of integrity, yet many accounts describe a private life filled with infidelity and behavior that contradicted his public image. Hollywood helped keep those stories out of sight for years, proving that sometimes the biggest performance wasn't delivered on screen. It was the carefully crafted image audiences believed was real. Number 2, Orson Welles. Orson Welles was the kind of genius Hollywood couldn't ignore and couldn't always tolerate. After revolutionizing cinema with Citizen Kane, he earned a reputation for speaking his mind with absolutely no filter. If someone asked for his opinion, they'd better be ready for emotional damage. In an industry built on compliments and handshakes, Welles preferred brutal honesty, and he rarely apologized for it. One famous example came in 1983 during a lunch when actor Richard Burton tried to introduce his wife, Elizabeth Taylor. According to accounts, Welles bluntly refused, and later admitted he had told Burton to go away in far less polite language. His sharp tongue didn't stop there. In conversations later published in My Lunches with Orson Welles mocked several Hollywood legends. He described Marlon Brando as looking like a huge sausage, dismissed Bette Davis's acting and appearance, and even called Humphrey Bogart a coward who only picked fights when he felt safe. Ironically, Welles also criticized Citizen Kane, the very film most people consider his masterpiece, downplaying its importance, despite it changing cinema forever. Welles possessed extraordinary talent, but his oversized ego and relentless criticism often overshadowed it. He spent years clashing with producers, directors, and studio executives, burning bridges almost as quickly as he built them. In Hollywood, everyone loves a genius until the genius starts reviewing everyone else. Number 3, Errol Flynn. Before superheroes filled movie theaters, Errol Flynn was Hollywood's original action idol. With his sword-fighting roles in classics like Captain Blood, he became the fearless heartthrob every studio wanted. But in 1942, his real-life story took a dramatic turn that no screenwriter could have imagined. Instead of making headlines for another blockbuster, the Flynn found himself at the center of one of Hollywood's biggest scandals. That October, Flynn was accused of statutory rape by a 17-year-old girl following a party at his Bel Air home. Just 4 days later, 2 additional charges surfaced, involving allegations from a 15-year-old who claimed Flynn had assaulted her aboard his yacht the previous year. The accusations dominated newspapers across America, transforming the nation's biggest swashbuckling hero into the focus of a sensational courtroom drama. Ironically, while audiences watched Flynn portray brave military heroes on screen during World War II, he was spending his days defending himself in court. Although Flynn denied the allegations and was ultimately acquitted by a jury, the trial permanently altered his public image and became one of the most controversial celebrity cases of Hollywood's golden age. The contrast couldn't have been more striking. On screen, Errol Flynn always rescued the day with a flashing sword and a charming smile. Off-screen, he was fighting a very different battle, one that continues to shadow his legacy decades later. Sometimes Hollywood's biggest adventure wasn't playing the hero, it was surviving the headlines. Number 4. W.C. Fields. W.C. Fields made millions laugh, but if you had to work with him, you probably wouldn't be laughing for long. Famous for his razor-sharp wit, love of gambling, heavy drinking, and jokes about disliking children, Fields carefully built the image of a grumpy old man. The funny part: according to many who knew him, that act wasn't always an act. Behind the scenes, he had a reputation for being short-tempered, impatient, and incredibly difficult whenever things didn't go his way. Crew members reportedly learned one simple rule: don't waste W.C. Fields' time. If he felt someone wasn't taking the production seriously or slowed down filming, his frustration could explode without warning. While audiences saw a lovable troublemaker on screen, co-workers often encountered a man whose sarcasm could sting harder than any punchline. His sharp tongue became almost as legendary as his comedy, making him one of Hollywood's most intimidating personalities to work alongside. Yet that's exactly what made Fields so unforgettable. His comedy worked because it embraced the darker side of human nature, the selfishness, pettiness, and bad thoughts most people would never admit to having. He simply said them out loud, and somehow made audiences laugh instead of gasp. Whether he was playing a character or simply being himself, one thing was certain: W.C. Fields proved that sometimes Hollywood's funniest man could also be one of its hardest to handle. Number 5. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando revolutionized Hollywood with legendary performances in A Streetcar Named Desire, The Godfather, and Last Tango in Paris. But according to people closest to him, the man behind the Oscar-winning smile was far less heroic. His private life has remained overshadowed by accusations of emotional manipulation and troubling treatment of women, leaving many to question whether his greatest performance happened off-screen. One of the strongest accounts came from actress Rita Moreno, who dated Brando for nearly 8 years. In an interview with Variety's Actors on Actors, she admitted she was deeply in love with him, but described the relationship as emotionally devastating. Moreno said Brando repeatedly cheated on her, controlled the relationship, and left her so heartbroken that she attempted suicide by taking pills at his home. Even while calling him extraordinary as an actor, she didn't hesitate to describe him as a bad guy when it came to women. Brando's name also resurfaced in discussions surrounding Last Tango in Paris, after co-star Maria Schneider said she felt humiliated and violated by the way a controversial scene was handled, an account that fueled decades of debate about power and consent in Hollywood. Brando's talent changed cinema forever, but the stories shared by those closest to him paint a far more complicated legacy. His performances earned standing ovations, yet the allegations surrounding his personal life continue to spark difficult conversations, proving that even Hollywood's brightest stars can cast the darkest shadows. 6. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart built his legend playing Hollywood's ultimate tough guy. From The Maltese Falcon to the unforgettable Casablanca, he became the face of cool confidence. But behind the camera, the real Bogart was reportedly far less charming. During the production of Casablanca, the film itself was already in chaos. The script was constantly being rewritten, and even Ingrid Bergman admitted she had no idea how the story would end. While everyone else struggled with the uncertainty, Bogart was fighting battles of his own. At the time, his marriage to his third wife, Mao Methot, was falling apart, and his drinking problem was becoming impossible to ignore. Cast members recalled that Bogart usually kept to himself, spending breaks playing chess instead of socializing. Bergman reportedly tried to get closer to her co-star by inviting him to meals, but he almost always refused. His frustration didn't stop there. He allegedly clashed with director Michael Curtiz throughout filming, and even the fact that camera tricks were needed to hide the height difference between him and Bergman became another source of irritation. Ironically, all that tension disappeared the moment the cameras started rolling. Despite the unfinished script, personal turmoil, and constant conflict behind the scenes, Bogart delivered the performance that defined his career. The chemistry between him and Bergman looked effortless, even though reports suggest they barely interacted off-camera. It's one of Hollywood's greatest contradictions, while Casablanca became one of the most celebrated love stories ever filmed. The atmosphere behind its creation was anything but romantic. Number 7. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra had one of the greatest voices in music history, but apparently his love life could make even his hit songs sound peaceful. Long before becoming a global icon, Sinatra found himself making headlines for reasons that had nothing to do with music. In 1938, he was arrested on a charge of seduction after authorities claimed he had been involved with an unmarried woman. The charge was later dismissed, but before the ink had even dried, he was arrested again, this time on an adultery charge after police discovered the woman was actually married. He spent about 16 hours behind bars before that case was also dropped. Legal trouble wasn't the only shadow following Sinatra. His reputation as a relentless womanizer eventually caught the attention of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who opened a file that eventually grew to more than 1,300 pages. Investigators examined his friendships, political connections, and even rumors about his health. One of the strangest reasons a letter claimed the screaming teenage girls at Sinatra's concerts could create the kind of mass hysteria capable of producing another Hitler. It sounds unbelievable today, but the FBI took the concern seriously enough to monitor him for decades. Despite the investigations, no major criminal wrongdoing was ever proven. Still, the contrast was unforgettable. On stage, Sinatra made millions swoon with his smooth voice. Off stage, he somehow managed to attract almost as much attention from law enforcement as he did from his fans. That's one encore few celebrities would ever ask for. Did this secret completely shock you? If it did, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to see how many of you never saw this coming. Number 8. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo built her legend as Hollywood's mysterious queen, the woman whose beauty and talent left audiences speechless. But behind the glamorous image, she reportedly had a reputation for being cold, distant, and brutally dismissive. While other stars were busy making friends, Garbo seemed to treat social interaction like it was a low-budget horror movie. If you wandered onto her set uninvited, don't expect a warm welcome. One story perfectly captured her attitude. During filming, Garbo unexpectedly visited actress Marion Davies' set, quietly watched the production, and even sat in Davies' chair. Flattered by the surprise visit, Davies later decided to return the courtesy by stopping by Garbo's set. Big mistake. According to Davies, Garbo immediately demanded to know who had entered, forcing director Fred Niblo to ask Davies to leave. When Davies politely explained she was simply returning the favor, Garbo delivered a cutting response. She hadn't come to see Marion at all. She had only wanted to watch a really great actress. The insult reportedly left Davies in tears, while Garbo remained completely unfazed, later dismissing her with the words, "To me, you're null and void." Garbo's talent made her a Hollywood icon, but stories like this earned her a reputation for arrogance that lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Sometimes silence speaks volumes, but in Garbo's case, the few words she chose could hurt more than an entire speech. Number 9. Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just Hollywood royalty, she practically turned romance into a full-time blockbuster. With dazzling beauty and multiple marriages, she dominated headlines almost as much as the box office. But one relationship in particular shocked Hollywood and forever changed the lives of everyone involved. It proved that sometimes the biggest drama wasn't in the script, it was at the dinner table. The scandal began after the tragic death of Taylor's third husband, producer Mike Todd. Seeking comfort, she grew close to singer Eddie Fisher, the same Eddie Fisher who had been Todd's best man and was still married to actress Debbie Reynolds, one of Taylor's closest friends. Their affair exploded across newspaper headlines, and while Taylor remained one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Fisher paid the highest price. His son Todd Fisher later said the scandal literally ruined his career as contracts disappeared and his public image collapsed. Ironically, Taylor's own marriage to Fisher didn't last either. While filming Cleopatra, she fell in love with co-star Richard Burton, launching yet another affair that ended her marriage to Fisher just 5 years after it began. Taylor's extraordinary talent was never in question, but her personal life often overshadowed her career. She kept finding herself at the center of Hollywood's biggest love stories, only these romances didn't end when the credits rolled. In Elizabeth Taylor's world, happily ever after usually came with another headline waiting just around the corner. Number 10. Faye Dunaway. Faye Dunaway captivated audiences with unforgettable performances in classics like Bonnie and Clyde Network and Chinatown. On screen, she played powerful, unforgettable women. Off-screen, however, she reportedly earned a very different reputation. For years, stories about explosive tantrums, impossible demands, and clashes with co-workers followed her from one production to another. If Hollywood handed out Oscars for difficult behavior, some people joked she'd have cleared an entire shelf. The stories only grew louder over time. In 2019, Dunaway was reportedly dismissed from the stage production Tea at 5 after crew members accused her of physical outbursts, verbal abuse, and refusing to learn her lines. But those weren't the only incidents. Actress Rutanya Alda claimed that while filming Mommy Dearest, Dunaway ignored a planned stage slap and struck her for real. Veteran wig designer Paul Huntley also recalled an occasion when Dunaway allegedly slapped his assistant's hand over a hairstyle she disliked. Actor James Woods later described working with her as equally difficult, claiming she frequently lashed out at people on set whenever something didn't go her way. There's no denying Faye Dunaway's extraordinary talent, but the stories surrounding her behavior became almost as famous as her films. While audiences saw elegance and control on the big screen, many co-workers described a workplace where tempers could flare without warning. In Hollywood, sometimes the biggest drama wasn't written into the script, it was happening between takes. Number 11. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney spent decades playing the lovable boy next door, winning over audiences with his charm, quick wit, and unforgettable performances alongside Judy Garland. But according to several accounts, the man behind that innocent smile was nothing like the characters fans adored. Off-camera, Rooney's life was reportedly filled with gambling, substance abuse, and behavior that left a much darker impression than any movie ever could. Turns out Hollywood's nicest kid wasn't always so nice once the director yelled, "Cut." According to reports, Rooney's gambling habit and personal problems often spilled into his professional life. He was also accused of using the infamous casting couch to lure aspiring actresses by offering auditions for roles that allegedly didn't even exist. One of the most disturbing claims suggested he had a relationship with a 14-year-old Elizabeth Taylor while he was already in his 20s. Although that allegation has long remained controversial, it has continued to cast a shadow over his legacy. Actress Margaret O'Brien also described Rooney as abrasive and difficult to work with, while others recalled his habit of making cruel remarks about co-stars, including Taylor herself, despite starring with her in National Velvet. The contrast couldn't have been greater. On screen, Mickey Rooney represented innocence and optimism. Off-screen stories of addiction, explosive behavior, and disturbing allegations painted a far more complicated picture. Sometimes Hollywood's biggest plot twist isn't written into the script, it's hidden behind the biggest smile. Number 12, Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas was the definition of old-school Hollywood. He starred in legendary films like Spartacus, broke barriers by publicly hiring blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo, and earned a reputation as one of the industry's toughest leading men. For decades, he was celebrated as both a movie icon and a champion of artistic freedom. But after his death, a much darker conversation began to overshadow the applause. For years, rumors had circulated that Douglas was the unnamed Hollywood star accused of sexually assaulting actress Natalie Wood when she was just 15 years old. According to the long-standing allegation, Wood was invited to his room at the Chateau Marmont, where the assault allegedly took place before she was warned never to speak about it. The claim was never proven, and Douglas consistently denied wrongdoing throughout his life. Even so, after his death, the accusations resurfaced across social media, where many people questioned whether one of Hollywood's greatest legends had escaped public accountability for decades. Critics and commentators revisited the allegations, while others argued there was never enough evidence to reach a definitive conclusion. The contrast couldn't have been more dramatic. On screen, Kirk Douglas fought injustice and stood up to powerful enemies. Off-screen, his legacy became divided between extraordinary achievements and unresolved accusations that continue to spark debate. In Hollywood, sometimes the final act isn't written until long after the curtain falls. Number 13, Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen earned the nickname the King of Cool. But according to his former wife, life behind closed doors was anything but cool. While millions admired his fearless image on screen, the real drama reportedly unfolded after the cameras stopped rolling. Fast cars, blockbuster movies, and endless fame couldn't hide a marriage that was spiraling into fear addiction and explosive jealousy. Turns out, the most dangerous scene in McQueen's life wasn't filmed on a movie set. In her memoir, Neil Adams described a terrifying night fueled by McQueen's cocaine addiction. She recalled that he repeatedly pressured her to use the drug, insisting it would make her feel better. When she refused, his paranoia reportedly took over. Believing Adams was having an affair, McQueen demanded to know the identity of her supposed lover. After she jokingly hinted it was an Oscar-winning actor, he allegedly pulled out a gun, pressed it against her temple, and threatened to kill both her and the man he believed she was seeing. Adams later described the incident as one of the most frightening moments of their marriage. The contrast couldn't have been greater. On screen, Steve McQueen played fearless heroes who stayed calm under pressure. Off-screen, according to Adams's account, addiction and jealousy turned that confidence into something far more dangerous. Hollywood crowned him the King of Cool, but behind the spotlight, The temperature was anything but cool. Number 14, Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball made America laugh like few entertainers ever could. As the queen of television comedy, she built an empire with her quick wit, flawless timing, and unforgettable performances. But according to several actors who worked with her making audiences laugh, was easy working with her was the real challenge. Apparently behind every perfect punchline was a perfectionist who expected everyone else to keep up or get out of the way. One of the best-known stories came from actor Tony Randall, who guest-starred on Here's Lucy in 1971. Randall later recalled that Ball controlled every detail on set, constantly directing actors and crew while showing little concern for anyone's feelings. He admitted many people considered her extremely tough to work with because she bossed everyone around. Yet Randall also defended her, explaining that Ball knew exactly what she wanted and was almost always right. In his words, taking orders isn't so bad when the person giving them is usually the smartest one in the room. It's hard to argue with results when you're creating one of television's biggest hits. Lucille Ball's demanding personality may have frustrated plenty of people, but it also helped build one of the most successful careers in entertainment history. She didn't believe in second best, and neither did her productions. Sometimes being a comedy legend meant making everyone laugh on camera, and making everyone sweat the moment the cameras stopped rolling. Number 15, James Dean. James Dean became Hollywood's ultimate rebel, but according to many who worked with him, he didn't just play difficult characters, he was one. While movies like Rebel Without a Cause turned him into a cultural icon, his behavior behind the scenes reportedly left directors and co-stars exhausted. Sometimes the biggest drama wasn't in the script, it was simply getting James Dean to cooperate. Biographer Donald Spoto wrote in Rebel: The Life and Legend of James Dean that Dean was often rude, foul-mouthed, and unprofessional. During his Broadway years, press representative Robert Mann didn't hold back calling Dean the most uncooperative, moodiest, and most offensive actor he had ever worked with. Even fellow star Rock Hudson admitted Dean was difficult to be around, saying he rarely smiled, stayed moody, and lacked basic manners. Actor Vaughn Taylor later recalled that Dean's habit of improvising scenes without warning constantly disrupted other performers and frustrated directors trying to keep productions under control. Years later, columnist George Will even argued that Dean's rebellious screen persona helped inspire the anti-authority attitude embraced by many young people in the 1960s. Ironically, the very personality that frustrated so many people also made James Dean unforgettable. His unpredictability gave audiences a raw authenticity few actors could match. But behind the legendary image was a man whose talent often arrived hand in hand with conflict, proving that sometimes Hollywood's brightest stars can be the hardest to work with. Number 16, Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis made millions of people laugh, but according to those closest to him, life behind the curtain was anything but funny. Known as one half of the legendary duo with Dean Martin, and celebrated for decades as the face of the Muscular Dystrophy Association, telethons, Lewis built the image of America's favorite comedian. But behind the applause, he was reportedly battling addiction, depression, failed relationships, and accusations that painted a far darker picture. Lewis openly admitted that his life was marked by pain, including drug addiction, serious health problems, and even a suicide attempt. Yet the most disturbing claims came from his own family. His youngest son, Joseph Lewis, publicly alleged that he endured years of routine physical and emotional abuse from his father. Their relationship became so fractured that the two eventually stopped speaking. When Joseph died of a drug overdose in 2009 at just 45 years old, Jerry Lewis neither attended the funeral nor made a public statement. Years later, Lewis confessed that he had blamed himself 1,000 times, but also admitted that once he stepped onto the stage, the pain simply disappeared. That's the strange irony of Jerry Lewis. The man who dedicated his life to making strangers laugh allegedly struggled to show compassion inside his own home. Hollywood remembered the comic genius. His family remembered someone very different. Sometimes the loudest laughter hides the deepest silence. Number 17, Bette Davis. Bette Davis wasn't just one of Hollywood's greatest actresses, she was also one of its fiercest personalities. Long before celebrities worried about public image, Davis said exactly what she thought, no matter who it offended. Behind the Academy Awards and legendary performances was a woman whose sharp tongue became almost as famous as her acting. If Hollywood had a queen of brutal honesty, Davis would have won by a landslide. In her autobiographies, The Lonely Life and This and That, Davis openly criticized some of the biggest names in the industry. Her most famous target was longtime rival Joan Crawford, whom she described as a vain vodka and Pepsi-selling skilled sexual politician. Their feud reached its peak during the filming of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, where even minor disagreements reportedly turned into full-scale battles. Davis also revealed that her relentless ambition came from her demanding father, who once pointed to the stars and reminded her that she was insignificant unless she worked hard enough to earn recognition. That lesson fueled the determination that defined her entire career.